Hi, everybody. I'm just going to give it a moment to make sure everyone gets in here and then we will get started. Feel free to drop your name and where you're from in the chat so we can see who we're talking to. All right. It looks like we are all getting settled, so we will go ahead and get started. I'm very excited to welcome Tammy McConaughey to speak here today. She is the Director of Education and Certification at LCI, and she is going to be presenting Reliable Promises, Reliable Leadership, Women Leading with Lean. So without further ado, go ahead and Tammy, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, through rolling through the chat too, dropping in your name and where you're at. It's great to see some familiar faces, but also some familiar organizations as well. So as said, I'm here to speak a little bit about reliable promises and reliable leadership, women leading with lean. And a lot of what I'm going to do today is kind of walk through how I've used lean in my journey as a leader and growing into a leader in the construction industry. So as said, I'm Tammy McConaughey. I currently work for the Lean Construction Institute, LCI, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. But why am I here? Why should you listen to me or care about my journey? For one, I believe that fighting for the things that you care about is especially important, especially in this industry that we live in. I love this industry. I started in the construction industry in the early 2000s. At that time, I was working for GE, but they own ModSpace, so your trailers, your office trailers on site. And I got an introduction to kind of get out on some construction sites and kind of see what was going on. And it was exciting. It was so exciting to be out there, you know, when we've delivered trailers, exciting to see what was happening, exciting to see what was going on. In that time, I also got introduced to Lean. And at that time, GE was under everybody gets an introduction to Six Sigma and Lean. And I got my introduction at that point, and I really kind of fell in love with that philosophy. I was not applying it at all really yet until later in my career, but I found that I was out of a job soon after that when they decided to sell ModSpace to a different company, and I wasn't willing to relocate my family at that time. But that kind of started my journey in this lean journey was that next step. We talk about catalysts, and that was a catalyst for me. That catalyst turned out to be a role at a mechanical contractor in San Diego, California. And that mechanical contractor role started out as a receptionist. And I was sitting there as a receptionist and taking on more and more work. And at that time, I started to think about, what does this look like for me? Where do I want to go with this? Well, I really enjoyed practicing lean. I really enjoyed the Six Sigma aspects of those. I had at that time had my green belt in Six Sigma and was working on my black belt in Six Sigma. I needed to submit a project to get my black belt. And so I went to the company's leaders and said, hey, I'd really like to do this project. It's going to cost money for me to put this in front of the board and have it certified. Are you willing to help me pay for that? And at that time, they'd been giving me more and more work to do and had told me that they didn't really have it in the budget to give me a raise at that time. And so we worked and negotiated this out. This would be in lieu of a raise. And I submitted my project. I saved the company $100,000 in warranty fees. And I submitted my project to the governing board at that time. And what I received back was, this is more focused in lean, but you have proven that you can do Six Sigma and apply the tools in a real life scenario. And so I kind of took that. I was like, gosh, what do I do with this? Where do I go with this? I was working for a mechanical company, like I said, that they did tenant improvements, retrofits, service, and new construction. And I'd been working pretty much touching every department at that point. And lo and behold, I found the Lean Construction Institute and I got involved. I got so excited about what I was learning along that way, trying to absorb as much as I could and apply it in my daily role, apply it on projects that I was supporting at that time as a construction coordinator, applying everything I could. And it was not, it was being noticed. The owners were noticing it. They were noticing the benefits of that, but they didn't want to make a full-time commitment to that. I was on a project with Balfour Beatty at that time, and a gentleman that was on there, him and I tried to do the last planner system, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. And one of the things that we learned was, God, it sucked. It was the most traumatic experience I had of my whole construction career. And we were encouraged to write a white paper about that and submit it to the International Group for Lean Construction about our experience and kind of what we thought went wrong with that. And so we did. And we got to go to Fortaleza, Brazil and present because our paper was accepted and we were asked to present on that. So there we went to Fortaleza, Brazil. And on the streets of Fortaleza, Brazil is where I met that next catalyst point. And her name is Rebecca Snelling, if you are familiar with her. But at that time, she was there with a group of people and we just happened to run into each other on the streets of the boardwalk. There was a fisherman selling his catch of the day, and we'd all kind of gathered around to see what these fish were that we had never seen before. And it ended up being, you speak English, we speak English too. Like, why are you here for this conference? And it ended up being more of that conversation, right? But that was my next catalyst in my career. That was my next catalyst of fighting for the things that I care deeply about. Because at that time, I knew more than anything that I wanted to do something with lean. I wanted to take that to the next step. A couple months after that, we were invited to present with at the Lean Construction Institute at their major conference in October called Congress. And then from there, there was a job posting for a lean coach for J. Dunn Construction, which lo and behold, my new boss would be Rebecca Snelling. So that catalyst just carried me forward on that journey, just into that next step. My husband and I made a commitment. We moved ourselves and our 4 children from San Diego, California to Portland, Oregon for the weather because the sunshine was just way too much at that point. But we moved because we knew that this would be something that I would forever regret if I did not take this chance. Now, what was so important about this? And this is where this ties into this quote. What was so important about this is I truly cared about this industry. I truly cared about the people I met, and I truly cared about making it better than I found it, right? We want to walk away from something, leaving it better than what we found it. And lean was the way that I believed was the way to do that. Lean principles, lean tools, lean systems, all of that just made sense in my head of this is how we make this industry better. And I was there to fight for that by being a lean coach, by being able to lift people up and help them improve and help them on this journey. It tied into my values as a person, right? Making a purposeful impact, grace, giving people grace for their imperfections, recognizing that that's the beauty of it all. Humble curiosity, being humbly curious, but then also to that inner harmony, creating inner harmony for ourselves and for others. So today I want to walk you through some of these lean principles and lean tools that I found that have helped elevate not only my career, but also my leadership. Part of why this is important for us today on this call. As of 2024, 14% of the industry workforce is comprised of women. I am one of those women that I want to be there to support every single woman in that room. And this is the way I'm giving back to support that. To describe the feeling of walking on a job site and seeing a woman in the trades with a tool in her hand out there making a difference, that I still to this day can remember that day that I saw that first woman. She was a carpenter. She was out there holding her own. Before I moved to Oregon, I had never seen a woman in the field. And it was amazing. I was in awe of her. To be able to see that number increase every single year, that's the difference that we are here to make. And it is amazing. I have my own younger daughter. She's 14 years old, and we've gone back and forth. Well, actually, she just turned 15, excuse me. We've gone back and forth on, kind of what the future looks like as she's in high school. And one of the things she's exploring right now is 3D modeling. And we've talked about that as a career in our industry, as a woman in our industry, to be able to be a part of that. And she's excited about that. And it makes me excited to hear that as well. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. I prayed for patience and God gave me 3 daughters. So here we are. But I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And so it's very important to me to support these females in their journey and wherever that may be. I'm very fortunate that my 2 older daughters, they are not in the construction industry, but they haven't taken the traditional path. And it's very uplifting as a mom to see them kind of push their way and make their own path through that. So let's talk a little bit about lean before we get started. I want to make sure we are all on the same page and have a basic understanding together. So as you can see on the screen here, when I talk about lean in terms of how we use this in our industry and what shows up, lean is a culture of respect and continuous improvement aimed at creating more value for the customer. When we take those lean principles, which are on the right hand of your screen, and I will talk through those here in a minute too, and we give those along with the systems, methods, and tools to a construction team and have a team implement those, that's when it becomes a lean project delivery system. When we are focused on project management, project delivery within those lean systems, we are really focusing on creating flow, optimizing the whole, building a culture of respect for people. Culture of respect for people. It's not just your please and thank yous and your politeness. It is respect for the people that show up on the project every single day, respecting their capabilities and what they bring to the table, but also providing them the resources to do their job to their best abilities and improve that. We do that by focusing on the whole of the project. The whole of the project being not just, I'm a mechanical trade, or I'm a carpenter, or we're just the general contractor. We want to look at the whole life cycle of that project. What does continuous flow, what does that look like from the very beginning to the very end of the project, with all of those parties included? To do that, right? Like I said, to do that, we have to focus on the flow, but also focus on generating value and understanding value. Value is not monetary. Value is what I get for what I give, right? That could be monetary. I am giving something monetary. I'm giving time. I'm giving mental effort, but I'm also getting some of that in return. What is this project going to help us do? Not just our client, but our community, right? Our organization, the team working on that. So optimizing that whole, generating value and understanding what that is, focusing on flow. Have you ever been so embedded in project or work that you lost sight of time? And next thing you know, it's an hour or a couple hours later, but you were in the flow. Nothing was hindering you. You were just able to run with whatever you were doing. That's a great example of flow. That's what we want to create in our projects. That's what we want to create in our industry. That unimbibed, unencumbered flow. To do that, we have to eliminate waste. Waste is anything that is not bringing value to that process, to that customer. And at any time, we're customers of each other. Currently, you guys are all my customers right now. Now, I might ask you a question and have you guys respond in the chat, and that's going to change that paradigm to then I am your customer and you're providing me information. So elimination of waste. Some of you might have heard about the 8 wastes. I'm not going to go in those today, but if you Google those, you'll see what those are too. But a lot of that is the things that we end up being frustrated with or hinder us, constrain us. Those end up being wastes. When we start to eliminate those wastes, that creates continuous improvement, right? We have to be continuously improving that by eliminating those wastes and making those processes, making the work around us better and better and better. So now that we have baselined on that, we're going to move on. And this is not advancing. So let's talk a little bit about continuous improvement. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like on our journey, right? We all continuously improve in some way or another, whether that's a new route to work, a new route to the job site, because maybe there's traffic on this one, or there's road work, and so we have to go away. So we find a better, faster way. I used to always, when I would go into the office, I used to always kind of challenge myself. Is there a different way? Can I learn more about the side streets just in case? Can I beat my time for tomorrow? Right? We always want to get better than we can today. So continuous improvement and lean is focused in that plan, do, check, act methodology, the scientific thinking methodology. Now, it is just what it sounds like if we get down to the basics of it. I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to check back and see if the plan worked and I got the results I expected, and then I'm going to adjust to that. So how does that show up in your career? Well, I am a lifelong learner. I love knowledge. I love information. I also collect books sometimes just to collect information. I tend to be a hoarder of knowledge. You could probably go on to my Google bookmarks and find at least 100 bookmarks of information I want to go back to. But the key is how am I going to use that information, and how am I going to use that to continuously improve? This is thinking that this PDCA thinking is something that I started to challenge myself to use in my daily role. It wasn't just about how can I get more information, but how can I use that to improve the work that I was doing? What am I learning and how am I applying that? So I was making a plan. This is what I'm going to go do. That could be as simple as I need to run this report. I need to do this work. I need to meet with this team or facilitate this meeting. This is what I expect to happen. So I make a plan. Then I go and do it. Checking back with myself or even the people that are involved afterwards through a plus delta, which is a really simple at the end of a meeting or a small event or any kind of event. It could be a work event. When I say event, I don't necessarily mean a meeting or gathering. It could be something, a process that you do. What worked well that I want to keep doing that brought value? A delta, what did not work well? And what can I do differently? So that check, bringing that into that, and then making adjustments on that information. I ended up starting to do that on a daily basis. Sometimes we would do that during meetings. Sometimes that would just be at the end of my day. Man, what worked well? When you're in a new role, when I think about early in my lean coaching career, when you're in a new role, having that reflection point was key. Understanding how I can improve myself and improve my performance was very important. Some of the bigger things that I would do as far as plan, do, check out was a retrospective. Retrospective is a bigger than a plus delta. It's usually focused on a phase of work, like a milestone plan, something like that. We would do it at the end of a milestone if we were on a project. But taking the time at the end of a project to do that with a team was so beneficial. But taking time to do that with myself was even more beneficial. Retrospectives are something that I have done every year for the past couple of years for myself. I usually do a half-year retrospective and I usually do an end-of-the-year retrospective. But looking at that and saying, what is working well for me, not just in my career, but what is working well for me in my life right now? What is going well? What are my wins this year? What has felt good? And then what's not working well and why? Am I overloaded? Am I traveling too much? Have I not been able to focus on my family or my community groups, right? Fostering those relationships. Have I not been able to focus somewhere? Maybe I'm having communication problems somewhere with somebody. A relationship isn't working out. Or maybe my health. Maybe I just have not been able to focus on my well-being like I've been able to. Really being able to understand that and then think about, what am I going to do differently? One of the simplest ways to look at a retrospective is, what do I want to keep doing? What do I want to stop doing? And what do I want to start doing? So then being able to even make adjustments right there mid-year. Okay, I have the next half of the year. I had some goals set for this year. How I'm going to adjust to reach those. Or maybe they're not the right goals. Maybe I've learned they're not the right goals. Right? So pulling those into my daily career allowed me to really stretch that PDCA thinking muscle. Also, being able to pull that PDCA thinking into daily interactions, conversations that I was having. And this is still, I'll tell you, this is often a challenge because conversations are the hardest. When we get into a conversation, emotions come into play, right? And so being able to fall back on that PDCA thinking of, I went into this conversation expecting this. I had these expectations in my head. Were they met? Yes or no? If no, why not? Okay, let me check in. Is my emotional state different? Do I need to put myself in a different place? Is this other person, what I'm expecting here? Do I need to be humbly curious and explore more? How can I adjust right there in that moment? But how can I adjust out of that conversation for the next conversation? PDCA thinking has been instrumental for me to even pull out of that reactive mode that we often get into. I don't know about you, but as a mom, a wife, a friend, a colleague, all of the above, sometimes it's overwhelming. It is overwhelming to try and tackle my to-do list every single day and to try and be everything that I really, truly want to be for everybody. By using that PDCA thinking, it has really helped me gain control of that. All right, let's stop for a minute and just pause and take a moment to think through this. Here's my plan, what's not working, where I need to adjust. And sometimes being that plan and that do and that check-in is this really important to me right now? Is this where I need to be spending my time and my energy? And so we adjust the plan. That's how we create that harmony, right? And create that purposeful impact. Understanding that adjustment needs to happen every single day. Another big piece of that, I am a total complete nerd when it comes to the Last Planner system. And I'm not sure, some of you might have heard of the Last Planner system. You might have heard of pull planning. You might have heard of another piece of it like you see on the screen here. I try to implement this in my daily work every single day. I was a lean coach on projects for the Last Planner system, but really pulling this into myself and how can I better plan my work has been a lifelong journey. Not lifelong, I guess that's right, career-long journey for me. I'm not that old, guys. But it's been instrumental. I used this to help my son get through his senior year of high school. It was a matter of sitting down and talking about his senior project that he had to have to graduate, talking about the dates that he had to meet with required information, setting those milestones, understanding, all right, if you have to have a plan and submit it, if you have to submit your topic and your plan of how you're going to research this by this date, what does that mean? What do we need to have ready for that, to get an A on that, to get that accepted and approved? That's setting our milestones, understanding what those conditions of satisfaction are for each milestone. What does success look like? Then being able to say, let's work ourselves backward to today's date to get to this first milestone, that pull planning. Okay, what do we need to do? What's the information? How are we going to get there? Once we have that defined, then we can better understand and make that work ready. We ended up having weekly meetings, just, walking up to his bedroom, talking. All right, this is what we got going on this week. Are we on track? What do we need to do this week? Do we need to go to the library? Do we need to plan this? Do we need to plan this? Right? Having those, and then when something didn't work, taking the time to understand it. By breaking my work down in this manner every single week, that allows me to think through a lot of this. That allowed him to be successful. We broke that large project down into smaller chunks. We made a plan and we worked that plan. I utilize this a lot in content management now that I do for LCI. I utilize this also too in just commitments that I have made, because the big part of this right here of breaking your work down and thinking backwards is that learning improving. Pulling that PDCA cycle into that learning improving. This didn't work as planned. How can I get better? Let me go make my plan again. I'm going to rework my cycle. Let me go make my plan again. Go do it, check back. Where do I need to adjust? We're constantly pulling that PDCA cycle into here. But that has taught me a lot about myself. That has taught me a lot about how I show up. That has taught me a lot about my discipline. That has taught me a lot about what feeds me, what doesn't feed me, especially in terms of work that energizes me versus work that kind of sucks that energy out of my soul. We don't always have that control over everything that we need to do in our daily lives, but understanding how to better manage that has allowed me to better take care of myself and how I show up for work. If I know I'm going to have a very rough content creation week or a very rough meeting schedule, making sure that I put time in there to be able to focus on some of that work that helps re-energize me, focus on conversations that help re-energize me, I end up having a better week and I come out to be a better employee, a better teammate, and a better teammate in my personal life as well. But I have to be able to plan that effectively. And by using these 5 connected conversations and by really focusing on what are those milestones, right? This week could have very specific milestones. We could be rolling out a new workshop and I need to have my content in this week. And that's a milestone I need to understand. If I understand those handoffs and I understand what that looks like this week and the next week and why, as long as what I need to do this week, that allows me to better structure my work. Reliable promises. You know, it's interesting learning about reliable promises over the course of my career. In the beginning, this was a training. It was a training that we gave, and I never was really good at practicing this, but I was really good at training on it. There's a lot that I've learned about reliable promises to myself and to others over the years. And it's true, its essence, when we make a commitment, oftentimes what happens is we jump up when somebody asks us to do something and we say, absolutely no problem. I got this, right? And we jump right into that and we go and do it. And then we execute the work and we bring it back to the person who asked us. We hand it off to them and say, here you go. And we either get great job or we get, this is not exactly what I wanted. Go do this again. And we end up running around in this circle called the workflow loop until we get it right. There are some things that can make us more reliable promisers that we don't maybe take into consideration when we're saying, yes, I can do this. And let me give you a great example. One of the leaders that I worked for at one time asked me to, he wanted to have every week, or the request was to provide him a list of what I was working on that week. And so made a nice Excel spreadsheet, you know, kind of put in there the task and the hours and everything. And I sent that to him. And I just kept sending to that every single week. There was no response back. So I just kept doing it every single week. About a couple months into it, I said, hey, just want to check in with what I've been sending you every week on what I'm working on and how much time I'm spending on this. Is there anything that we can do to improve this? Is there anything else you'd like to see? Any questions you have? His response was, oh, yeah, I really haven't been paying attention to it. I just really wanted it that 1 week, and that's all I needed. How many times has that happened to you guys? That somebody asks for something, you keep doing it, and it's not needed? Drop your experiences in the chat. I'd love to hear a little bit more about them. Because our industry, as Ashley said in the chat, is very unpredictable, right? Construction can be very unpredictable. And oftentimes what people are asking for changes, or their needs change, or we didn't fully understand what they needed in the first place. So how do we change that into becoming reliable promises? Communication is the first thing. Did you guys know that you have the ability to say no? It is the most uncomfortable thing in the world to say no. But the conversation should not stop at no. It should be no, but I can do this. No, I don't have the ability to do this, but what about this? right? But it is the hardest, most uncomfortable thing to tell somebody no, especially if you are younger in your career and you're being asked to do something. But part of that communicating no is better understanding the what and the why. Understanding what people are asking for. So being responsible for that too. Being responsible for asking the questions, being responsible for the success or the failure of that promise. I'm going to pause for a minute because I see some stuff coming into the chat. So there's a great question in here that I think I want to pause and address. Ruth asked, what do you do when you're new to a company and feel the need to prove yourself? So you say no to everything, even if it's overwhelming. I think, Ruth, honestly, having that, understanding that ability to say no, but also understanding a little bit further, and we'll talk about this in a minute, the conditions of satisfaction around what you're asking or what people are asking for, and really what they are asking for will help. That communication of the ability to say no, but then also too, on the other side, asking, what do you need this for? Why do you need this? Help me understand how this fits into my current workflow because I have all these other priorities, right? So that way you're having a reliable promise conversation. You're exerting your competency at that point, right? Competency in a reliable promise is understanding that I have access to the skills and resources needed to do this or complete this for you. Sometimes that means that that person's on my team and I have the access to them, not necessarily access for myself. And that's part of that. Hey, I don't have this ability, but this person has this ability and I'm going to go talk to them. It also means that you can negotiate that, right? Having that, understanding your own time resources, understanding how that fits into the priorities. All right, I'm going to negotiate this to say, I can't do this now, but I can do this here. Or how does that priority fit into this? So you're not standing up and saying no to everything because I'm overwhelmed. You're negotiating how that fits into your current workload. It is okay to commit to commit. It is absolutely okay to say, hey, I need to get back to you on if I can commit to this or not. Because that's going to allow you also to go back and have that conversation, do a little bit more research on what that is. Find out more information. So you are making an informed decision, an informed commitment. We have some great comments in the chat too that are talking about how this has showed up: double documentation, right? Unnecessary documentation when we don't understand or make those reliable commitments, or we make a commitment without understanding what that is. A lot of that goes back into that double documentation too, or not even understanding who's handling what. So that's a big, huge waste right there too, as far as the 8 wastes are concerned. An Excel that is uploaded weekly that the person who used it is no longer working for the company. Absolutely. So understanding what the need is and the why. A lot of these go back to, why do we do this? Why do we need this information? Why are we making this commitment? Going back then to the conversation I had about providing that weekly Excel spreadsheet of what I was doing, right? There was no conversation because this was a senior leader. I wasn't going to question why. I was just going to jump. But once I had that conversation and understanding what they were looking at, why he needed it, I was better able to first look back and say, could I have done something better? But also stop spending my time on something that was non-value. Then I could change that commitment. I had control of that commitment. I was responsible for the success and failure of that commitment. I was becoming a better communicator. The key to all of this really are those conditions of satisfaction. So conditions of success. What does success of this reliable promise look like? Taking that time to have those conversations. Again, I am forever a student of this. There are times that I am very focused on understanding that. And there are times that I am chomping at the bit to just go and get started. But being able to just take the time and say, ooh, what about this prompted to me to not even have this conversation? Or I completely missed this commitment. Why? Why did I miss this commitment? Was this a lack of priority? Was this a lack of resources on my end? Like, what was it that made me miss this? Taking that time to PDCA that and understand it better has helped me become a better at one, commitments and promises to myself, commitments and promises to others, and commitments and promises to my relationships that matter to me. That is a huge builder of trust. I will tell any of you young in your career, the one thing that has really, really provided me a lot of success and a lot of, a lot of learning moments in my journey has been the relationships that I have fostered along the way. From the time that I started at J. Dunn Construction, and even before that, the time I started at the mechanical contractor, every job, those 2 jobs to where I am now, have been because of a relationship that I have had with somebody. Now, I had the competency and the skills to get the job, but I would not have known about those if it wasn't for a relationship, if it wasn't for networking, if it wasn't for having conversations with people. When we start to practice those reliable promises and commitments with each other, that improves those relationships with each other that we have. It improves that trust. It improves that interaction and that experience that we have with each other. Conditions of satisfaction in our home life. One of the big things that I have learned in my with my children is maybe understanding conditions of satisfaction when I ask them to do something. In my head, I expect something to happen, and then reality doesn't always turn out that way, right? But having that clear, even for me to say, hey, I really need you to go clean your room right now, and this is what I'm looking for. But also understanding that interaction with my friends. Are we going to show up today having conversations like, hey, I want to put an end to, we're only going to spend this much time talking about work. Now we're going to spend this much time talking about life, right? Setting those conditions of satisfaction have made our relationships that I am engaged in even stronger, making my community stronger. So how does that bring us to reliable leadership? When we are looking at Last Planner system, when we are looking at lean principles and some of the other systems and how do we show up and use those, we are engaging alignment. When we are all aligned, or we have alignment on where we're going and how we're going to get there together, we are better leaders. Leadership is not about dictate and control. Leadership is not about, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do or what I want you to do. Leadership is about engaging our teams, aligning on where we need to go and how we're going to get there together. There are going to be times that you need to step up and you need to lead and say, hey, this is where we need to go. There are times in your career, it doesn't matter if you're in an actual leadership role or you're on a team. There are going to be times that we need to insert ourselves. But when we garner alignment amongst our teams, when we garner alignment amongst our departments within our industry, we build a better experience and we optimize that whole, creating more flow where we're going. But to do that, we have to have psychological safety. Psychological safety, I feel like it's become one of those very ambiguous terms that it can mean a lot of things. Just like if we say we need to communicate better or we need to be more collaborative, right? While I'm kind of telling this story too, I'd love to hear your guys' explanation of psychological safety in the chat as well. So go ahead and what does psychological safety mean to you? Drop that in the chat. Psychological safety is when I am actively listening, I am showing up, I'm being empathetic, I am humble inquiry, I'm asking questions to understand. I am not telling somebody how stupid they are, dumb they are. That's very basics. But psychological safety means that you are feeling safe to speak up in that situation. You are feeling safe to bring something in the table. One of the 8 wastes is underutilized human potential. Not speaking up, not sharing ideas, not collaborating. Yeah, feeling safe to ask. Ashley put in there. Jennifer added to that as psychological safety is key, and respect each other and value everyone and being humble. Absolutely. These are all things that add to this. When we show up and we engage in reliable commitments, we engage in alignment with our team and where we're going and how we're going to get there. We engage in actively listening. We engage in bettering ourselves and that growth mentality through that PDCA cycle. We are helping to create that psychological safety within our teams, within our communities that allow that leadership, that reliable leadership to really stand out. That strengthens the trust. If I show up and I'm like, God, I have this idea and I just really want to share it with you. Or I think like I've had this experience and I've had this experience on this other project and I'm afraid it's going to happen here. And I can share that openly with my leader. Right? That's a whole better experience for that team. But if somebody can come share that with you, or I messed up, it absolutely helps break the imposter syndrome, right, Ashley? Like even showing up and saying, I messed up, I screwed up, that creates a whole nother level of psychological safety and strengthens trust. That's what reliable leadership really is about, sorry. And that's where we need to learn and grow with that. Creating that culture of accountability starts with us. By clarifying those conditions of satisfaction, making reliable commitments, normalizing that learning through that PDCA, it is absolutely okay to screw up. Believe it or not, it happens all the time. If you aren't screwing up at least once a day, you're not learning. Shalina has a great question. What do you do when not everyone are aligned in the same vision in the team? How do you communicate the essence of collaboration to make sure everyone is on the same page? I think going back to some of what we've talked about, psychological safety being, right? But also that humble inquiry, that active listening, giving everybody a voice in that vision in the team and finding those commonalities. So collaboration can be a lot of things. One of the things that we forget is a key ingredient to collaboration is creative conflict. We don't all have to agree, but we all need to understand that this is where we're going to go together and how we're going to get there. We're oftentimes going to see things very differently because we all bring different experiences to the table. And by experiences, I don't necessarily mean capabilities. I mean our backgrounds, projects that we've been on, our life experiences. And so we all have a different view of what that vision is, as long as we are bought into what that looks like at the end of the project. So by clarifying conditions of satisfaction, understanding and everything, right? What does success look like? What does success look like for you? What does success look like for me? What does success look like for others? That doesn't always have to be the same definition of success, but we're going to come to an understanding of how do we reach that together. We have a webinar this week that is talking about conditions of satisfaction at the project level. If anybody is interested, please go to our website and sign up for that. But also too, in our personal life as well, what do conditions of satisfaction look like? Everyday commitments, making our commitments as reliable as possible. And when they're not, learning from them, normalizing that learning, that PDCA cycle. Man, if I could think back to several times when I was younger in my career, thinking back to what I was learning, how many times I was screwing up or trying to fix something, or, just like quickly just hide it under the rug or fix it before somebody found out. If I had the ability to go back and normalize learning and understand, here is that safe space for me, whether that's in my own personal time or with that's an untrusted advisor, a trusted friend, a trusted leader, a trusted colleague that I can talk through that with. Find somebody that you can have those conversations with. I think those have been the most crucial conversations for me too, is having somebody that would give me good feedback, constructive feedback that I could use that PDCA cycle on. So for me, it really was about action, about taking action, about not just hoarding information, about not just learning, but taking that into action. Like I said, some of the things that I've learned along that pathway, that plan, do, check, act. How do I implement that into my daily, weekly, monthly? How do I implement that into my career? Whether that is plus delta daily, which I still do, I still reflect back. I still make a plan. I'm sorry, but I will forever be a journal person, right? I have my planner, I have my journal, I have everything right there in one. Reflection at the end of the day. What worked well for me? What brought value? What didn't go as planned? What did not bring value? What can I do differently? Utilizing not my words are evading me today, utilizing that not just in meeting settings, but in my own personal settings as well. Utilizing that with my friends too. Hey, is there something that wasn't working out well? Like, I feel like we got off where we were supposed to be. Like, what happened? Understanding, using those retrospectives in your career, right? Using those retrospectives at the halfway point of the year, at the end of the year, to help set and guide you for that next year. Focusing on how you're spending those moments. Asking for that feedback, absolutely. Having a good feedback loop. Understanding how you can make reliable commitments. Part of that being understanding those conditions of satisfaction. We're always going to enter into areas of overwhelm. I think as females, we always tend to raise our hands and say, I can do this, or I want to do more, especially as that 14% number that I shared in the beginning climbs, right? Because we want to prove ourselves time and time again. We want to show that we have the ability to do this. By managing those reliable commitments, using those 5 connected conversations of Last Planner System, we are able to have better planning conversations for ourselves. Now, it sucks when you're having a better planning conversation for yourself and nobody else around you is. It gets even more frustrating. But understand, when you have that conversation and you consistently have that conversation, other people are going to start taking notice. They're going to start coming to you with the information that you're asking for. They're going to start pulling that into their conversations as well. That influence is going to start to show up. Then fully understanding and leaning into conditions of satisfaction and success, making that a very active part of your vocabulary daily. Why do you need this? When do you need this? Showing that in that humble inquiry. Don't ever assume why somebody needs something or what they're asking for or why, but right, adding that into that humble inquiry, adding that into that psychological safety and that active listening. So now I want to pause, and I'd like to hear from you guys in the chat. What is one action that you can take later today, that you can take today after this webinar to get closer to reliable commitments, to continuous improvement, to any of the things that we've discussed today? I'm watching the chat. To lead with the intent of respect for people, absolutely. Attending more seminars, right? That's great. Learning more, but then what do you do with that afterwards? What actions are you going to take? To do more webinars? Absolutely. I love webinars and podcasts too. I don't think it would show up on the camera. I'd show you. I actually have one of my journals that I have is a learning journal of, here's my key takeaways. Here's what I'm going to go do with this too. So great thing to keep in mind as you're listening. What is one thing that I'm going to go do with this in my team, in my personal life, in my own workflow, right? Like thinking about that reflection point. Having a reflection point, seeing where I can lead with in my company. Yeah, absolutely. Where can you step in sharing notes from webinars, podcasts, events, sharing that, right? Having those conversations. I love having accountability partners as well too. So when you're sharing those notes, you know, talking about what is that, how does that show up with each other, taking that to that next level of learning into action. Applying what you learned, absolutely. More journaling with legible handwriting. I don't think I've really gone back in a lot of my journaling, but it beyond a month scenario, a lot of times I go back to say, hey, I know I said I was going to take this action or this doesn't work well. What was that again? So if the handwriting is an issue, keep that in a OneNote, right? There's a lot of great note-taking apps or online, or I like to use Notion as well as an online platform. But there's a lot of that help combat the handwriting. Be aware of creating psychological safety. Again, psychological safety too is a practice, and there takes a lot of self-awareness in that as well. Identify an accountability partner, absolutely. Good therapist, you know what? That can never be undermined, the value of a good therapist. A question, how would you deal with interpersonal challenges at work? I think that's kind of that could be a whole nother webinar on its own. You know, one of the things too is when I'm having interpersonal challenges at work, I like to take the time to reflect. And there's an exercise I like to do called left brain, right brain. And you take a piece of paper and you fold it in half. And on the left-hand side, and I'm probably going to mix up my sides, but on one side of the paper, it doesn't matter. Left side of the paper, one side of the paper, write down the conversation. And then on the other side, and keep it factual. Don't insert, usually when we use descriptive words, those are emotional words. Keep it factual. So-and-so said this. I said this. On the other side, when you're reflecting on that, write down your emotion. This, when this was said, it made me feel this. I felt this. I got angry. I got frustrated. So when I said this, I said it angry or frustrated. It's going to cause you to reflect on that situation, but also separate the fact from the emotion. And when you separate the fact from the emotion, it allows you to take a different look at that interpersonal challenge. Also, something else to really reflect on too is if that interpersonal challenge is showing up in text or email, we often input our own emotions into that text and email when we read it. So be aware of that, but also be aware of what could this other person be dealing with or challenged with right now that is inciting this. We need to look at that both sides, putting yourself in their shoes. Is there something that they're challenged with right now, or something that they're frustrated with right now, or something that's happening in their life that really is bringing this challenge to focus? And how can I better handle this? Oftentimes interpersonal challenge is not something that's going to go away because we really can't remove the person, right? And oftentimes that challenge is associated with a process or something that that person has no control over, and they're just as frustrated with it. It's oftentimes not the person. So how can you look at that situation, and how can you show up differently in that? What is the humble inquiry that you can be humbly curious about and ask more questions? So some of the other things we have in the chat: consistently updating task tracking, right? Require the design build projects as priorities change. Absolutely. Getting refreshed to a new week when you are so bummed at psychologically at work. Again, looking and understanding what fills your bucket, what energizes you so you can better plan your week or fill and build those in. And don't let that slide. There are times maybe that could just be like, I'm going to go take a sunshine break for 5 minutes or 2 minutes, because that's all you can fit into that day. But what are those little sparks that you can build into your day? There's been days I've been so meeting heavy, right? Back to back, triple booked, jumping from every meeting that you don't have time to do that. But again, what are those little things that you can build in? What are those little sparks of joy for you? You have to understand what that is for you as well. So we're getting to the end of our time here. I did promise to talk about the Lean Construction Institute. So if you are on a lean journey or you would like to start a lean journey, Lean Construction Institute is a wonderful resource of information. We have information that is free to the public. We also have some of our resources are for members only. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, I don't know if we're a member or not. If you want to send me an email and I can help you with that. If you don't know if you are or not, I can help you look that up too. But we're really here to, our dream, our mission, our vision is to transform the building industry, transforming its practices and cultures to be better than it is today, right? And that's through lean principles, lean methods, lean systems and tools. You can also, by the map you see here on your screen, there are communities of practice. And the communities of practice, you do not need to be a member to join a community of practice events. Our communities of practice hold monthly events. Most of them hold monthly events. Some of them are every other event month. Some of them are even more than just monthly. But reach out to your local community practice. You can do that via LinkedIn. You can go to our website, leanconstruction.org, which you can see at the bottom, and find our community, your local community of practice. We also, like I said, have a very robust webinar schedule this year as far as blogs and lean topics and other content. So if you are interested in that lean journey or you're on it and looking for more resources, please go to our website. And as always, feel free to reach out to me. My information is right here on the screen. Reach out to me via email, cell phone. I don't promise that I will always answer, but leave me an email or send me a text and I will get back to you. And again, visit our website. There's a lot of great resources and we are constantly adding to that this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy. This has been a great start to WIC Week. Everyone, thank you so much for your participation. Don't forget to register for our webinars throughout the week at wicweek.org. And thank you so much again, Tammy, and everyone for your participation today. You guys have a good rest of your Monday.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.